Hello, fellow listeners. This is yours truly, Ferris Kennedy. Unfortunately, I'm not in the house tonight. I am actually in New York City at the Ed Sullivan Theater conducting an interview with the concierge of the Dakota Apartments. That is correct. The same apartments that John Lennon lived in from 1973 to 1980. That was in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, right in 72nd Avenue and Central Park West. I'm conducting a nice interview with the concierge who operated that building during the time of John Lennon. And a funny little fact, across the hall of John Lennon and Yoko Ono's apartment lived a wonderful singer by the name of Roberta Flack. Correct. And let's see what other interviews I can conduct. Get both some stories of John and Yoko and even Roberta. And now, I leave you to my colleagues at the Ferris Wheel Rock Show.
Thank you, Ferris. Thank you, Ferris Kennedy. And we look forward to decoding the scattered insights of your dark and depraved New York City sojourn. Ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves. We have another biography of the Doors. And it came out a few years ago, 2015. I didn't read it until last month. It's called Love Becomes A Funeral Pyre. The title taken from a lyric in the second verse of Light My Fire, I believe. It's written by Mick Hall, who the dust cover describes as, quote, England's best known rock writer, the founder of Classic Rock magazine, and a contributor to Mojo, Rolling Stone, Playboy, and others. His books include definitive biographies of Led Zeppelin, Axl Rose, Metallica, Prince, and Leonard Bernstein. And Lemmy, unquote. Sounds like Mr. Wall is a busy lad, and he knows his stuff. So conservatively, there are maybe 200 books, 300 books on the Doors? Why do we possibly need another one? By the way, ask yourself the same question when you see any new book on the Beatles, Stones, Queen, Guns N' Roses, Bob Dylan, Beach Boys. Ask why, oh why, sweet Jesus. Okay, so you're a rock writer. Actually, you're England's best known rock writer, and you're pitching a book on the Doors to a publisher. And the publisher says, have you uncovered something new about the Doors? And you answer, well, no. And the publisher says, well, why the hell should I be interested in anything you have to say about Jim Morrison and the Doors? Because you reply, because I'm going to really explode all the mythology surrounding the group, really drill down to the marrow, to the point where it will occasionally appear that I don't like the Doors as people and can even barely tolerate them as a group. I see, says the publisher. So you're going to load this with attitude. Right, the author replies, and if that means sarcasm, if that means often assuming a world-weary, condescending assessment of personalities and events reserved for those privileged with retrospect, if that means risking a lot of discussion and passing judgment about sexual preferences, then so be it. And the deal is signed. Your Honor, let me submit my opening statement in the trial of Mick Hall's Love Becomes a Funeral Pyre. Your Honor, let's just jump procedure and let me enter into evidence the first paragraph of the book. Quote, this is the end. Jim alone, not in a bathtub, but on the toilet, head down, trousers around his knees, found just like his hero, Elvis, would be 6 years later, arms dangling lifelessly by his sides, brains fried. Unquote. Your Honor, I submit that there is no proof whatsoever that Jim Morrison died on a toilet in a Paris nightclub. Complete conjecture. What the author has done, Your Honor, is establish an editorial tone, in this case, that he isn't going to be muscled by the Morrison-worshipping acolytes. Not him. In fact, in the opening scene, he places their hero in a toilet, just like his idol Elvis would die in 6 years, as if that was in any way relevant. Let me continue, Your Honor. In the same paragraph, he uses a literary technique called stream of consciousness or interior monologue. I quote, "He'd been predicting his own death for months, of course. Janice had gone the previous October, Jimmy just 2 weeks before that. You're drinking with the next one," Jim would only half-jokingly tell friends, except that Jim didn't really have friends. Certainly not Pamela, with her hell-red hair and her smack and her new boyfriend, the Count, or Ray, with his "Jim, just for me" shit to your face, or John, that asshole, always with the long, hard looks and the judgmental eyes, and even far-out Robbie, his mind blown by the acid and the permanent midnight, all mumbled passive-aggressive bullshit. Robbie, the secret businessman, unquote. Okay. Therefore, the author is in effect placing his own opinions in the head of who? A healthy Jim Morrison, a dying on the toilet Jim Morrison, a dead Jim Morrison, and above that, these are silly, fictional appraisals of his bandmates, all negative assumptions of 3 men he referred to as his brothers, even though, as grown-ups, they had differences. Your Honor, we're still on the first page of an almost 400-page book. The jury might want to take a long, long bio break. But please, nobody die in the toilet with your hands dangling by your side. Okay, podcast listeners, you get my vibe. Yeah, we're tired of these drug-infested, mentally unbalanced rock stars revered like bargain basement messiahs. We're tired of that. To most people, most celebrities seem dumb. Whew. We live in a tell-all age empowered by emotionally remote algorithms and a generally bored populace, hungry for dumbed-down news, which is fake to the extent that some poor underpaid editor has to file 200 words on any crap ready to go for an 11 p.m. cutoff for the morning edition. And yes, we know the technique of suggesting a detached remote analysis translates to integrity and honesty, and that mercy is for morons and only obfuscates reality. We all know that. Author Mick Hall didn't have especially malicious intentions. That won't carry you for 400 pages. He just needed a strong editor, as opinionated as himself, to say, "Lighten up on the hate mail, Mick. Go easy, son. We're all driving to the same town." But that didn't happen. And that's the core reason why we have in our hands a good book, not close to a great one. And it is a good book. Hall collates interesting incidents, especially as they highlight Morrison's pre-Doors life. It is here Hall is less judgmental, and sometimes, surprisingly, seems to let the events speak for themselves. It's refreshing. Podcast people, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend your ears for a moment to the reason we're even speaking about the Doors today. They're wonderful, they're creative, distinct, and enduring, and it seems like Jim Morrison has something happening on Love Street.
She lives on Love Street, lingers long on Love Street. She has a house and garden. I would like to see what happens. has robes and she has monkeys, lazy diamond-studded flunkies. She has wisdom and knows what to do. She has me and she has you. On Love Street, there's the store where the creatures meet. I wonder what they do in there. Summer, Sunday, and a year. I guess I like it fine so far. Lingers long on Love Street. She has a house and garden. I would like to see what happens. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la.
That was The Doors with Love Street off the album Waiting for the Sun, which was recently reissued, if I recall. 50th anniversary reissue, so I'm sure a lot of work was done on it, extra tracks, this and that. Okay, so our buddy Mick Hall is still hard at work on Morrison. Let's watch him take on Ray Manzarek, though, the keyboard player. Here we go. Go for it, Mick. Go for it. Quote, "For Ray, who would rewrite the story again and again after Jim's death, it became not the end of a shattered career, but the beginning of a new religion. Ray, who made the whole thing up, man. When I last spoke with Ray just a few months before he died, toward the end of the conversation, he said, I wouldn't be surprised if I got a postcard or a phone call tomorrow from Jim saying, hey man, I'm back. I'd been prepared to put up with his Doors hagiography until then. It was a trip to hear Ray Manzarek of the Doors talk about the sacrament of LSD. But when he gave me the Jim might not be dead shtick, I was surprised, then disappointed, then fairly disgusted. He was insulting my intelligence." Unquote. All right. I always have felt that Manzarek did have an irritating tendency to sell the Doors in an often coarse, self-reverential way, obviously exploiting media-fueled myths, while simultaneously parsing the Doors' history into beautifully rendered slogans and sounds. Mick Wall is not out of line to infiltrate the puff pieces in order to glean the truth, which, as we know, is always subjective. Likely, I think Paul McCartney could use some roughing up about this real-time re-editing of the Beatles myth. He's so good at it. It's just that Mick Wall breathes so much fire it tends to burn away those subtleties of a subject, which makes it interesting in the first place. An example, quote, UCLA in the early 60s was not the place to go for anyone thinking of a straight career. Ray spoke in italics a lot. He was always so certain of what he was saying, or at least wished to give the appearance of being so. Unquote. Now, that's an interesting observation of Ray's character, and you could extend it into a discussion of his leadership abilities, or lack of. But it seems to have come from one lurking in the shadows with a stiletto, rather than a responsible journalist offering insights devoid of agendas and presuppositions. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm cherry-picking just the rough stuff. The point I hope to convey is that editorial tone, once established, is comparable to cinematography in a film. It's massively influential, though not necessarily obvious to an untrained eye. So even if Mick Hall introduces, interesting viewpoints, they often seem more like a setup for the upcoming slapdown. And it takes him along some dark paths. He seems fixated, for instance, on Morrison's sexual proclivities. In fact, passes judgment on his behavior, which is odd for a biographer, especially a rock biographer. For a point of contrast, read the best rock bio ever written, by far, by Elvis Presley, a two-parter from Peter Grolnick. Most critics found it remarkable and refreshing that Grolnick passed no judgment on anything, let alone Elvis Presley, who was always such an easy target. Now, according to Mick Hall, Jim Morrison punched women, raped at least one, was likely bisexual, and was loaded with sexually transmitted diseases. Enough already. How much is guesswork? How much conveniently fulfills an aggressive strategic editorial approach, whereby if you create a fact, you will find it? I'm not a Morrison apologist. Pound for pound, most of his friends across the 20 or so Doors books I've read strongly indicate he could be a very difficult person. But basically he was okay, maybe even extraordinary. The generally accepted view is that he was bipolar, alcoholic, and later a user of heroin. And that might provide more areas of character revelation than just zeroing in on his erectile dysfunction. Let's listen as Mick Hall goes after Morrison's supposed ability at self-promotion. Quote, "Less convenient to the myth, but more true to reality, was the fact that Jim grew up a nervous child who wet the bed, something his mother found intolerable, and would repeatedly punish him for, forcing him to sleep in the wet sheets." Unquote. That's a fact? Really? What's the source on that? Oh, I see. The author's extending a branch to all nascent Freudians. Yes, it's wonderfully bespoke for analysis. He goes on, quote, "What can be agreed is that he felt abused. But that was Jim. From boy to man, always just a little different from the rest, always the one with the special excuses, always with the lovelorn eyes." Unquote. Jim Morrison had lovelorn eyes? Mick Hall doesn't have to try to kill Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison is already dead. At some point, the narrative bleeds into character assassination. But of course, Wall's only doing it in the name of demystification, of integrity, of not worshipping at the altar of the Lizard King, not like those other Lizard King worshipping rock critics. However, the study of character is the study of contrast. Any English lit major will tell you that. So if you destroy one side of the character with an unceasing barrage, then contrast is lost. The result, you get a narrative that limps to the finish line. Wall sabotages himself. The book slides into an inescapable screed, a rant from a writer confined, not liberated by an agenda. That truncated approach can only inspire throwaway lines, as when he mentions a book that he quotes from written by Dennis Jacob, a film lecturer, and a Morrison pal who actually just passed away. Quote, Dennis concludes by insisting that he never saw Jim make a move toward him or any of their friends. He adds, I only heard the rumors, unquote. Mick Rock just had to add that last tagline, even though the sentence itself includes the word rumors. It's pretty thin gruel. It doesn't stop. Listen, as the author describes Morrison in the studio, quote, he also appeared heavier than most people still pictured him. His voice was thick with booze and smoke, and his tongue was swollen with self-medication and lies. Whoa, his tongue was swollen with lies, aside from medication? It seems Mick Hall also has pre-med studies under his belt. Perhaps this is the moment Mick Hall crosses over from being a rock scribe to a prosecuting attorney. The author's tireless invective is unrestrained by a mature, moderated view, one that could help us understand who Jim Morrison was and how he succeeded with his three bandmates in conquering infinitesimal odds to become respected musicians and composers that still sell millions of records 50 years after they broke up. That's the real mystery, and one which, thankfully and gratefully, can never be abused or explained. So, let's kick it out as we say au revoir to Jim Morrison and the Doors with another great song, Changeling. See you later.
Come